The strictest safeguards in the world. That is what the Labour MP Kim Leadbeater promises in the bill she has set out to legalise assisted dying, one of the great issues of conscience of our times. For some, it is a place that the state should never go. The law, they say, is there to protect life, not enable its ending. For others, sufferers themselves or those who have seen relatives decline and seen their pain in their final months, assisted dying is a simple expression of choice, of human dignity at a time in life when so much of it is stripped away. In between those poles are those who have settled their thoughts about the principles at stake, but are very concerned about what you might call the practicalities, critically important issues about protection of the vulnerable, about checks and balances that might be put in place to minimise the chance of any abusive process, to ensure that those who make the decision to end their lives are doing so without any pressure or duress and are in a fit mental state to do so. Kim Leadbeater joins us in the studio. Good morning. Can you take me through how you see this process happening and what are those strict safeguards?
I can, and thank you for setting out the situation as it stands at the moment. That is the main reason that I've chosen to pursue this piece of legislation, because as it stands, the status quo is not fit for purpose. We've got people having very harrowing deaths, very distressing deaths, both for themselves and for their families. We've got people taking their own lives, and we've got people making journeys to other countries if they can afford to, but often doing so prematurely. So the starting point is a law that's not fit for purpose. And I fully take on board the need to get this piece of legislation absolutely right. And that's why it would be the strictest, the strongest piece of legislation probably in the world. With very clear eligibility criteria, this is just for terminally ill adults. It's not for anybody else. It's for people who are dying, and it is about shortening death rather than ending life. They have to have capacity, they have to have clear, settled and informed consent, and there has to be no coercion or pressure. And we actually make coercion an offence, which it isn't at the moment in this context. There would have to be 2 doctors involved in the process, 2 medical practitioners, a very clear, strong initial discussion with the patient, and then after the first assessment by the first doctor, a 7-day reflection period, followed by a second assessment by another independent doctor. After that, there would be oversight from a High Court judge who would have to speak to one of those doctors, so it checks, safeguards and balances the whole way through. After the High Court judge, there would be another 14-day period of reflection, and only then could someone take the journey for an assisted death. So as you can see, layers of safeguards, layers of protections along the way, which make it a very robust piece of legislation, but also address the current failings of the law as it stands.
OK, this is predicated, this idea is predicated on there being a choice between taking your own life and having some assistance in doing so, or going into palliative care, end-of-life care, as exists at the moment. The problem is, and this is Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has made this very clear, and this is why he won't vote for it, is that palliative care is simply not up to it at the moment. And he's been very, very blunt about that. Now, if that's the case, and he should know, then there isn't a choice. And people are being offered either a sort of horrible, horrible death or your option. And that's no choice at all.
Look, let's start by saying that we have some of the best palliative care in the world in this country. We have amazing people working day in and day out, supporting people at end of life in palliative care. I've got a local hospice which I visited recently, and they do fantastic work. And there's no doubt about it, you're right, there are challenges within the palliative care sector. But the reality is, no matter how good that palliative care is, there are some people whose needs cannot be met. And I've had stories of loved ones, people who've lost loved ones through harrowing deaths, which have taken in some cases hours and in some cases days. And the palliative care sector, as amazing as they are, cannot meet everybody's needs. So that's the first thing to acknowledge. But also, do you know what? Let's have that conversation about palliative care. And I'm really pleased that this bill is facilitating some of those conversations and addressing some of those issues. I had a very good meeting with the Association for Palliative Medicine, and I will keep having those conversations. I've met with Hospice UK. Let's turbocharge the need for better palliative care as well. And in some countries where assisted dying has been legalised, palliative care has actually improved, and that's something I would certainly like to see.
Should we not see palliative care in a place where at least the Health Secretary is happy with it before you introduce this kind of legislation?
Well, look, it's not either or. Some people want the choice of an assisted death, and they should have the right to have that choice. But let's look at palliative care alongside that. The other reassurance, I think, is this bill is not going to come into effect overnight. If it does pass the second reading on the 29th of November, there will then be a very robust series of scrutiny throughout Parliament in the new year. It will probably take about 6 months to go through that process. And then there will probably be a period of a couple of years. If it were to become law, it would actually be enacted. So we are just at the start of that journey. And having the conversation about palliative care alongside that, I think, is really, really important.
Does it trouble you at all that the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has made clear her opposition to the bill? She says she has an unshakable belief in the sanctity and value of human life. It means that's the Health Secretary and the Justice Secretary, the two departments that would be charged effectively with monitoring the process, and both of them are saying, we don't want this.
Well, it will be a free vote. The Prime Minister has made his views very clear, and there are a range of views within Cabinet. There are other Cabinet members such as Liz Kendall, Lisa Nandy, Hilary Benn, who are very supportive of a change in the law. So it's really important to embrace that diversity of opinion. And also, I fully respect Shabana. I've got a good friendship with her. But for her religious beliefs, this isn't something she could vote for. But to be honest, some of the best conversations I've had with people have been with people of faith who have said, look, my faith wouldn't allow me to support a bill like this, but who am I to stop other people having the choice that this would give them? And I've spoken to family and friends from Catholic denominations and others. I met with the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Carey, Rabbi Jonathan Romaine. They are fully supportive of a change in the law due to the suffering that they have seen over their years in their roles. So there is a diversity of opinion within politics, there's a diversity of opinion within religious groups and other groups as well. And that's why this debate is so important. And, whatever happens to the bill, I'm so glad that we're having this discussion. We're talking about death in a way that we don't in this country. We're just not very good at that.
Okay. I want to talk about the detail of the bill, if I may. Fergus Walsh, our medical editor, said that no other country that he'd seen had this final level of decision by a judicial figure, a High Court judge in our case. Isn't it really just a bit of reassuring box ticking having a judge sitting on the top of this? Because all he really does is says, OK, you agree, Doctor 1, you agree, Doctor 2, fine, OK, off you go. I mean, it's not actually a decision, is it?
No, it is. And I was very clear that this needed to be the case, because when I was looking at the research and looking at what this could look like, what I didn't want was a High Court judge having just piece of paper in front of him and going, tick, 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 yeah, that's all fine. He has to speak to the doctor. He has to speak to one of the doctors involved in the process. He can also speak to the patient if the patient is able to do so. And he can also, I'm saying he or she, obviously,
Yep.
can speak to anybody else that they want to. So if they want to consult a psychiatrist, if they want to consult other people, they can do that. So it is far from a tick box exercise. It's actually a really important extra layer of robust
If
safety.
they say no, will there be capacity for appeal?
There will be capacity for appeal if the judge says no, yeah.
Right, OK. Lastly, just this question of the old question of slippery slope, and I know this has been gone over a lot, but there is a point here where once you breach the principle that the state is there to protect life, as this does, you then open the way for others to come after you and say, well, OK, terminally ill, death within 6 months was what we thought, but now we're looking at chronic pain, now we're looking at greater length of illness. This will be amendable. Others will come after you and say, we need to take this further.
No, it won't be amendable. That isn't how it works in this country. Parliament is sovereign. Once this bill is passed, that is the bill.
Well, there's another Parliament along in a year, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years.
Well, I think
that's of sovereignty. They can change it.
Given the fact that we haven't debated this issue for 9 years, I feel very confident that once this bill is passed, this will where we stay. And there's other jurisdictions where that's happened. There's places like Oregon where they have not changed the eligibility criteria for over 20 years, and certain states in Australia as well. So if we set it out clearly, this is where the law will be. Other countries have different mechanisms where the courts can get involved. We don't have that. And that's why the courts have sent this issue back to Parliament and said, you must decide. And that's why we've got a duty to do so.
Kim Leadbeater, thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm joined by Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats. Sir Ed, you heard what Kim Leadbeater had to say. What do you make of the safeguards, the detail that she has put out in this bill?
Well, good morning, Johnny. I should say that I'm speaking in a personal capacity today as an individual MP. I've got huge respect for Kim, and I want to actually thank her for the way she's brought this legislation before Parliament with all the safeguards. I think she's right. We do need to talk about death, more about palliative care. We need a proper debate, and I hope we do get a really proper debate. But having wrestled with this issue for much of my life, I've come down on a different point of view. I'm against this legislation. I think the real problem is, I think the people who are terminally ill and also disabled people and others could feel under real pressure psychologically to end their life. They may not even voice that, but they could feel under real pressure. They could feel themselves a burden. And if we take this decision, I think actually those people will be less free because of that psychological burden.
We have all these checks put in place that Kim Leadbeater is making very clear. 2 doctors, effectively a cooling off period between nearly every decision that's made, whether it's by the individual involved or by the doctors, even by the judge involved. There's a lot of time there for people to say, hang on, this isn't actually the path that this individual wants to go down. You're not reassured.
No, well, as I say, I think she's done an incredible job in putting these safeguards together, and I don't in any way suggest that this isn't a very, very impressive piece of work. However, the point I want to make is that while I believe people should be free to make their own decisions about their lives, that's fundamental to me as a liberal, my worry is if we go down this route, that won't be the case. Far from being free, lots of people will feel under such pressure psychologically from themselves, not from being coerced, but from themselves to end their lives, and because they could feel a burden. I had to look after my mother when she was terminally ill as a young teenager, and I had to administer a lot of pain. She had a very, very painful disease, and in administering that pain relief and talking to her and being there at the end of her life, I came to a different conclusion to the proponents of this bill. Maybe I could have taken a different route, but I came to the conclusion that actually we shouldn't have this legislation. I think we should focus on better palliative care. And when people are feeling a burden, and then they look at the failings in our health and care system, where frankly palliative end of life care is far often not good enough, then people may feel they have no choice but to end their lives. And I really think, and I do respect what Kim was saying on your programme completely, but I really think the debate should be on improving palliative care, improving our whole health and care system, which frankly is just not good enough.
Can you see any set of conditions that you would agree with this, or is this effectively a principled opposition on the grounds that you've laid out, that people may feel pressured, etc., etc.?
Well, although I'm a practicing Christian, practicing Anglican, my views on based on religious beliefs, so I'm not an absolutist in that sense. But I do genuinely worry about people feeling a psychological burden. Okay. I've talked about my mother.
But you're never going to lift from people, presumably.
I think it's extremely difficult, and that's the challenge in this debate. Can you remove that? And so far, I've not seen any argument to suggest we can.
The flip side of that, and I know you'll be thinking about this as a Liberal Democrat, even if you're here in a personal capacity, the flip side is this issue of individual choice. And that if you can show, as Kim Leadbeater's legislation hopes to, that people are making a free choice of their own will, why is it the state saying no? You are a Liberal Democrat. That is about liberal democracy and the choices individuals make.
It's one of the reasons I've wrestled with this so much, Johnny, and why a number of my colleagues who will take a very different position from me. But here's the point. Rather than it being an increase in freedom, I think people will feel under a lot of pressure. When you're elderly, when you're terminally ill, even people with disabilities, I think they may feel that they've become a burden. They may not voice that, they may not say that, but they may feel like that. I want a society where those people feel valued and the care is there for them. And I really worry in the case of people disabled. I have a disabled son. I want people who are disabled to feel more valued. And I feel this approach I know this is about terminally ill, the bill before us,
Yeah.
but the approach
Yeah.
of assisted dying, I feel it could undermine that.
Okay.
And I don't want a society where that happens. I want people to feel that care is there, the health care is there, the palliative care is there, and their families will be there with them. And when I reflect particularly on my mother, but also in talking to many other people, going around hospices, there's amazing work that can be done. Okay. And I think if we had the highest quality palliative care that was available to all, I think this would change the debate for some people.
We will leave it there. Thank you very much, Sarah, Davey, and before that, Kim Leadbeater. Thank you.